Right now you can see the sun going in and out of clouds here on Long Island. And this is causing the precipitation that was supposed to be forecast to be delayed, likely lessening the amounts. First of all, I do want to note that my local weather data gauge at Farmingdale, the rain sensor is probably inaccurate there. But, there's still this delayed precipitation onset. However, that may not be as catastrophic as you think. Now, I can't use my computer for this because I'm not going to have access to it to make a video on this and another video that I might be trying to make today. But still, it's something worth talking about. Because basically, the drought has shown significant abatement in the month of March. And now even New York City has fallen into the abnormally dry category for the first time since, late October. The drought has actually started to significantly wane in the metro area. Now, you should have to realize that in the past 365 days, quite a few areas in the metro are still on precipitation deficits that are like 13, 14 inches. Parts of the metro area have had less than 75% of their average annual precipitation during this time. And there's a few reasons for that. April started off wet with a nor'easter from April 1st through 4th, and despite over 2 inches falling in that nor'easter, the month still finished below average. And in New York City in particular, less than an inch of rain fell in the final 26 days of the month. There was one period where there was actual concentrated rain from April 11th through 12th, and really outside of that, the most that you got were small isolated sprinkles. There was no consistent rain, I'll put it that way. May started off dry, and while there was significant precipitation towards the end of the month, specifically from May 23rd through 30th, much of that precipitation wound up being in the form of isolated severe thunderstorms. But I guess rain is still rain. June, though, dry, less than 3 inches in Long Island, less than 2 inches in the city. July started off dry too, which again prompted drought concerns, with it also being summer and with precipitation being a lot less than normal. Now, August did bring on 7 inches of rain across the metro area. August 2nd was a period of torrential downpours in the city, and same for the 3rd, and especially on the 6th. Then, the 18th was the final downpour, but again, I've said this, August 19th is really the start of when everything dries up, as it's really only one more time it really even rains across the city. And September, you have one frontal system crossing through on September 7th that brings about a quarter inch of rain, and that's it. Now, after that, at the end of the month, September 26th through 29th did bring on November's of Helene. But again, rainfall amounts varied. A quarter of an inch in parts of Long Island to a more, meaningful 1 to 1.5 inches in New York City. But that wasn't really going to be enough to overcome, the 6-week dry period. And as we know, in October, only a few drops of rain fell in what wound up being the driest month in New York City history, as well as one of the driest months in U.S. history. November, as we know, saw a drought continues to degrade as only 0.18 inches of rain fell in New York City in the first part of the month, before in the final 10 days, 3 inches of rain fell. And the city saw, and the metro area saw, between 4.5 and 6.5 inches of rain in December through various precipitation events, which seemed to quell drought concerns and put the area back into moderate drought or even abnormally dry. But again, it just wasn't enough. In January, there wasn't really that much degradation, but there was zero improvement in what wound up being one of the driest Januaries in New York City history, as again, only about a half inch of liquid fell. It's tough to have a January as cold as 2025, which wound up being the second coldest in the last decade. It's tough to have a January that cold, and yet still only see 3 inches of snowfall in New York. And that's what happened because of the drought. Many snowstorms just went further to the south in January by various methods, bringing little precipitation to the city. It was going to be the driest January in record New York City history until scattered showers on January 31st put the city just over what it needed to be to avoid that. Still though, February initially appeared promising, and while parts of the metro area got almost 4 inches of liquid in February, again, the city was kept to just like 2.5. So again, drought barely improves in February because February was another month that in a lot of places was dry. After there was a big bomb cyclone on February 16th, for example, we didn't see anything besides some scattered snowflakes on February 20th and a small rain shower on February 27th that really brought much in the way of cold and precipitation, really. Because here's the thing. That winter was one of the coldest winters that New York City is going to have this decade. All 3 months were below average, and the winter as a whole fell 1.7 degrees below average. Despite all of that, though, the lack of liquid led to snowfall totals in the area being just barely over a foot, which is tough to do when it's colder than average. You would think, if anything, that there would be more snowfall. But, alas, drought. It was a yucky thing that affected us all winter. Now, March, though, is where luck changes, as places that are in moderate drought are now abnormally dry, and several places are freed from drought. Doesn't start immediately, though. The only rain at the start of March is on March 5th, when extreme thunderstorms drop over an inch of rain across the city. But again, that's all we see in the first half of March. And remember that rain on March 5th was the first significant rain in the metro area since the 16th of February. February had lots of precipitation in the first half of the month, but almost nothing in the second half of the month. March was going to actually make a comeback and be sort of the other way around, as the system on the 17th came through, but again, disappointed. And a lot of rain during this time will be forecast and then wind up disappointing. But then on the 20th, severe thunderstorms crossed through the area that actually overperformed, and in the areas that needed the most, just west of the city, they got an inch. Now, much of Long Island was sort of left out to dry, literally, as there was only about 0.2 inches, but the rain affected the areas that needed it the most. 24th, another time when the city gets, quite a bit of rain, and then again on the 31st. And we see this wet period really take hold at the start of April as well, as April 6th winds up seeing over half an inch of rain in various parts of the metro. Again, parts of Long Island in those areas only get, around a quarter of an inch of rain, if that, from these storms. But again, it's affecting the areas that need it more, which is what's really causing this drought to end. Not exactly, having rain run over the same areas further east all the time, but having the rain affect areas that have missed out in other opportunities is what's causing an end to the drought. The drought probably peaked on November 20th, right before the first round of big November rainstorms, and we saw record rain. We saw over 1.5 inches of rain on that November 21st, and more rain in the following days too. We maybe hit a secondary peak around January 30th or maybe even February 1st as, a result of the dry January. And maybe March 4th was a bit of a tertiary peak with how much February had underwhelmed. But we're now seeing, actual regression taking place, and precipitation totals are finally catching up. Because remember how I said it was going to be really tough for 2024 to finish below average in terms of precipitation in August, and it wound up doing that way. But 2025, which is so far below average too, could maybe pick it up. And we're finally starting to see green grass return to the land. So the fact that it's not raining yet doesn't immediately concern me yet. Because yes, we need a rain, but if we get less than expected, it's no longer as detrimental with how much the drought has, contracted over these past few weeks especially. This drought contraction means that this area can handle the blow of it not raining as much. It can handle if it's goes a little bit dry. Because here's the thing, it probably will be dry for the next week, and then we will probably see more wet air return as Passover ends, but it's still going to be cold. And that's another thing with it when it comes to drought. Is cold air good or bad? And my answer is it depends. Now, when it's warm, it's easier for there to be lower humidity, which is bad. And of course, higher humidity makes it more uncomfortable on humans, even though it's more comfortable for plants. So colder generally means that the humidity percentage has to be higher. On the other hand, though, some of the most intense rainfall rates that you have require high dew points, and you can't really get those when it's cold. Also, if it's cold, as in it's freezing or close to freezing, the ground could be significantly less able to take in the rain that falls. And I'd say this winter, being as cold as it was, probably wasn't doing a drought too many favors. Snowpack was probably a good thing, and even though it was never that thick, there were points where, here in the metro, we did see at points where there was a few inches of snowpack around. But, it being cold also had several disadvantages for the wildlife, as it pretty much killed them. And by wildlife, I do mean the grass. And furthermore, the drought also meant that they weren't getting any precipitation, really. They were getting very little of it. And then it was cold, so the ground was freezing up again. So it was having a very hard time absorbing it. So March was actually a warm month. It finished in New York City over 4 degrees above average with aggressive temperature swings, but overall they did balance out to be warmer than average, especially on that day that it hit 81 degrees, even though the low bombed out at 43 degrees, which put the mean temperature for the day at only 62 degrees. And even though it, cooled off significantly after that, it then warmed back up. But as temperature rates, rise the fastest in April, us being stuck in a cold period may not be as ideal as you think. Remember, temperatures are forecast with highs hovering around 50 degrees. That's what they were, this past week. A lot of times they were stuck around 50 degrees, with sometimes in the afternoon even falling into the low 40s. And there's a good chance that tomorrow in the city, high temperatures stay constrained in the low 40s, with low temperatures falling to the mid 30s with precipitation. So snow can't be totally ruled out. We already saw a freeze happen, on Wednesday morning, which is very bad for sensitive vegetation. because the growing season had already started. And now it's like we're seeing this sort of harsh weather come back, and it's going to be raining for a while, then it's going to dry up, and then who knows how much more rain we're going to see in the future, and what it's going to look like after we see another week where it'll start off with highs in the 60s, but highs will fall back to the 50s soon enough. I don't know when we're going to see a point where we where we see high temperatures being sort of what they should be for this time of year. Remember, highs at the start of April are generally only around the mid-50s, but they do hit the mid-60s by the end of the month, and I don't think we're going to be at that point. And after you already had a cold start to the year, and March wasn't able to completely outdo that, April could be another dent into making 2025 potentially a colder than average year, which would be a nice change of scenery considering that 2023 and 2024 are currently tied for New York City's warmest year on record at 57.9 degrees, I'm pretty sure, is what they both are. It would be a nice change of pace, you know. Having actual cold in the winter was unique, and as we head into spring, having a cold April, which we haven't seen in a while, is interesting. Of course, March was still a blowtorch, but that always happens. It'll be interesting to see what happens as we progress deeper and deeper into spring and summer, and see, do we make up for all this lost time with sweltering heat waves and what happens, but that I'll do later.